Ford and the Nazis, Part 1, by Humongous. Quote, "We look on Henry Ford as the leader of the growing fascist party in America." Unquote. Adolf Hitler. "I'm a Ford truck man." I wonder if that means third-generation Ford vehicle owner and country music icon Toby Keith is an anti-Semite, ambitious to exploit slave labor and furtively work with Nazis. Just when you thought it was safe to drive a fucking Ford, you discover the namesake of said company blamed Jews for the problems humanity was facing during the 30s and 40s. In addition, Henry Ford dug Adolf Hitler like a backhoe does soft soil. This appreciation was reciprocated by Der Fuhrer, as the leader of the Nazi war machine stated, quote, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration." Aww. The infamous architect of the Third Reich proudly boasted a prodigious portrait of old Hank over his desk in Munich. So smile, Mr. Keith, as you croon with a guitar adorned in a Ford logo. Continue to clarify how Ford is all-American, the only truck you'll ever drive. Ignorant, a 1945 U.S. Army report classified Ford Motor Company as, quote, "the arsenal of Nazism," unquote. As Bill Hicks would say, quote, "Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control. Here's Love Connection. Watch this and get fat and stupid. By the way, keep drinking beer, you fucking morons," unquote. What the? We are talking Henry Ford here, right? The guy whose last name is on millions of cars internationally? Founder of Ford Motor Company, humanity's third largest vehicle manufacturer in terms of sales volume? The dude responsible for at least one auto and countless family garages? That Henry Ford? The very same. Lest we forget the Henry Ford who became a national hero for implementing the $5 workday during an era when it was customary to pay employees half that for a 9-hour shift. The same Henry Ford a considerable faction of the United States populace at one time believed should be president. Hank, master mechanic and the man so many heralded the greatest industrialist of his epoch. The prime example of someone with meager beginnings who managed to build his own empire through hard work. And who can forget the inventor of the assembly line? Funny how effective propaganda can be. In reality, Ford's initiation of the $5 workday had nothing to do with sympathy for his employees. As 1914 dawned, Hank was shitting his pants. It appears our hero was not the best of bosses. Anemic wages and a substandard working environment had resulted in almost 380% turnover at Ford Motor Company. Henry was forced to employ roughly 1,000 workers in order to retain 100 willing to stay on staff. In a missive to Ford, the wife of an employee wrote, quote, "Are you aware that a man cannot buck nature when he has to go to the toilet, and yet he is not allowed to go at his work? He has to go before he gets there or after work? The chain system you have is a slave driver. My God, Mr. Ford," unquote. Again, Ford hadn't increased wages nor curtailed the workday to 8 hours out of empathy. As Henry asserted, he'd lessened the severity of his slave driving to keep workers from quitting and increase productivity. As far as Ford becoming president, would you feel safe if the man at the helm, when asked if he could expand on the American Revolution, stated, quote, "I understand there was one in 1812, unquote. The same dude who attested, quote, "I don't like to read books. They muss up my mind," unquote. A true intellectual, fearful of sugar because he believed the jagged edges of its crystals would shred his stomach when ingested. An individual one journalist described as, quote, "outside of business, where Ford is a genius, his mind is that of a child," unquote. An icon of intelligence many thought was a moron. Too bad someone like that isn't around today, itchy trigger finger on the nuclear button. Oh wait, he is. According to Ford's sister Margaret, Henry exaggerated to the point of lying. This great industrialist hadn't been raised destitute, but was actually the son of an affluent father. In addition, Ford, rather than being a superlative mechanic, had surrounded himself with the best in the business. Henry called on the expertise of others to conceive his vehicles. Contrary to popular fallacy, Ford did not create the assembly line, he simply improved on the existing design. Yeah, Hank was a real gem, in the same way a polished petrified turd might be. Thus, when he began speaking ill of Jews, blaming them for troubles suffered by humans, it wasn't a big stretch for Henry. Suffice it to say, Ford fell into the bullshit quicksand so many bigots do, displaying his one-cylinder mind for humanity to see. Henry went so far as to author a book, The International Jew, berating what he termed quote-unquote bad devotees to Judaism. Equally insane individuals, called Nazis, got their creepy hands on the text, busting that shit-filled piñata wide open. When the Third Reich took control of Germany, copies of Henry's tome, bedecked with the names Ford and Hitler on their covers, were distributed to schools and Nazi offices across the country. In the words of the Führer, quote, "The book is being circulated to millions throughout Germany," unquote. Well, there's a blow to starving artists who've been pounding away at the keyboard for the past 25 years, relegated to self-publishing. I, and others like me, distribute truths for the betterment of humans, and nobody reads the material. Along comes some psycho with cash, and millions gorge themselves on the lunacy he's propagating. According to Baldur von Schirach, leader of Hitler's youth and notorious Nazi governor of Vienna, quote, "The decisive anti-Semitic book which I read at that time, and the book which influenced my comrades, was Henry Ford's book, The International Jew. I read it and became anti-Semitic. This book made in those days a great impression on my friends and myself because we saw in Henry Ford the representative of success, also the representative of a progressive social policy. In the poverty-stricken and wretched Germany of the time, youth looked toward America, and it was Henry Ford who, to us, represented America. If he said the Jews were to blame, naturally we believed him," unquote. Being an idiot isn't a crime. If it were, there wouldn't be enough prison cells to hold all the violators. There is, however, impropriety associated with forcing people into slave labor and working them amid concentration camp conditions. One can easily assign malfeasance to those who assist in the slaughter of millions of humans. Of these two transgressions, Henry Ford is guilty.